This film is about the enormous success and final decline of Salvador Dali, one of the best known and controversial artists of the 20th century. Dali died in 1989. His personality had become as well known as his paintings. But this is also a film made during the writing of a biography about Salvador Dali by the Irish author Ian Gibson.
And the great man himself. Bonjour, Señor Dali. ¿Cómo estamos?
The problem for any biographer is to separate fact from fiction, particularly difficult with someone like Dali, who loved to cultivate confusion.
Soy muy mal pintor por la razón de que soy demasiado inteligente para ser buen pintor. Para ser buen pintor hay que ser un poco burro. El día que Dalí hiciera un cuadro bien hecho como Velázquez o como Vermeer o como Rafael, la semana siguiente uno se muere. Y entonces yo prefiero hacer cuadros malos y vivir más tiempo.
At the beginning of World War II, Salvador Dali and his wife Gala fled to New York, where he was already famous. They stayed first in the house of their wealthy American friend, Caress Crosby.
Salvador Dali spent about a whole year at my place in Virginia. I had a lovely deer park that went with Hampton Manor, also a pond down at the end of the garden that was overgrown, and he decided that it would be a very good idea to make a real production of this. So we hauled a piano up into the tree.
The Americans loved Dali's looks, they loved his wit, they loved his paintings, and they loved everything about the man. And of course, he just loved their dollars. Dali was taken up by the wealthy and decided that the quickest way to make big money was to paint society portraits. What could be more novel to wealthy Americans than to see themselves meticulously portrayed in slick, surrealist settings? He now yearned for a Hollywood breakthrough and got it with Alfred Hitchcock.
It seemed to be a gambling house. But there weren't any walls, just a lot of curtains with eyes painted on them. A man was walking around with a large pair of scissors cutting all the drapes in half.
I requested Dali. Selznick, the producer, had the impression that I wanted Dali for the publicity value.
Yeah.
That wasn't it at all. What I was after was, again, the thing we talked about earlier, the vividness of dreams. As you know, all Dali's work is very solid and very sharp, with very long perspectives and black shadows. Actually, I wanted the dream sequences to be shot on the back lot, not in the studio at all. I wanted them shot in the bright sunshine so the cameraman would be forced to what we call stop down and get a very hard image. This was, again, the avoidance of the cliche. All dreams in movies are blurred. It isn't true. Dali was the best man for me to do the dreams because that's what dreams should be.
Publicly, Dali was to be remembered for Spellbound. Privately, for something else.
Jack sent me out to meet Salvador Dali at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And there he was, with those bulging eyes and the mustaches that quiver when he talks or he's excited, and immaculately dressed in a starched, ruffled white shirt. At a time, no man wore ruffled white shirts. He liked my bone structure and said I had the face of an angel and the soul of the devil. He didn't know me at all, of course. Maybe he was right. it was a little disconcerting at first because he would not show his face very often, and I couldn't see any part of him. But every once in a while, he'd duck his head around with one eye and that mustache, and I never knew it was going to appear at the top of this big board or the bottom or the middle. He did lots of sketching, and he did a lot of heads of me sketches, and then he did some sort of ethereal or dancing figures that he said he was going to use in a painting. I'd have a slip. He gradually got me to take off all my clothes. The last day that I worked for him, I went there as usual, and as I mentioned before, I felt very, I'd not been molested in any way, shape, or form. He'd been, what would one call a perfect gentleman? And I'd gotten used to his peculiarities. He used to leap around a lot with his bare feet onto couches and chairs. And then I was lying down. We'd had a tough session, and he said, let's take a rest, and then we'll go on from there. So I laid down on the couch and covered my eyes with my arm because the lights had been very strong. And suddenly, Dali leaped astride me. His penis was out. It was on my chest, and he ejaculated immediately, and then began to lick off his own sperm. I was so stunned because, you know, anything that I'd experienced before was the missionary position, I think they call it, and I didn't even know much about French kissing. So here's this man licking his own sperm off my breast, and for a second or two, I just laid there, and then I slid out from under him, ran into the bathroom, washed up, got dressed, and then the strangest thing happened. He saw me to the door, and the only apology made was that the reason he had not penetrated me, and that's the word that he used, was that he's faithful to Gala. And that was the last time I saw Mr. Dali.
Earlier, Dali had tried to collaborate with the Marx Brothers, and later with Walt Disney, but to his great disappointment, both projects fell through. He and Gala returned to New York. Well, it's a nice, quiet location. It's a nice, quiet location in the middle of Fifth Avenue. Dali was crazy about New York, and like his friend, the poet Lorca, who was very frightened by the place, Dali loved it and decided to become the king. And I think he certainly achieved that. Lorca fled to Cuba, but Dali stayed for 40 years.
La luna es un pozo chico, que la luna no va a ver con tus brazos, cuando de noche me abrazas. García Lorca.
Whenever he came here, he stayed in the St. Regis, and he always stayed in the same suite. Unfortunately, the place has changed. They're not letting us into film. The King Cole Bar is in another bit of the building. It's still there, but it looks different. And that's where Dali's court used to gather. His friends, his hangers-on, the beautiful people, the businessmen, the wheeler dealers, a lot of them. And this is where it all happened.
I've been told you met him in the men's urinals in the St. Regis Hotel. Is that true?
That is a
No, because
legend
we
that
both met him, and I certainly wasn't in there.
I wouldn't have suspected such a thing of you, Ellen.
You know, we showed him a painting that had been sold to us, and then we took it to Dali for verification of myself.
You didn't?
Myself has liked these paintings. He's a good painting, but myself is never do.
It took years to get the collection together. Somebody was going to sell one, and I would finally track it down.
When you're captured by the magic of Dali, why, it's pretty hard to back out. I mean, once you get bitten by the Dali bug.
When did you first start buying all his work?
Oh, about 1942.
This collection came from people all over the world that I got in touch with, talked, corresponded, and then somebody they'd want to sell a picture, and we'd buy it. And in the end, we ended up with $95 paintings.
No, it's incredible what you've done. And you had to sort of do a sort of detective
Many of you are wondering why a Spaniard has a museum in Florida, in the USA. And it's quite simple, actually. The collectors, Mr. and Mrs. Morris, on their first wedding anniversary, had decided to buy a painting by Dali.
We just fell in love with these things. The wonderful draftsmanship, the deep perspective, the beautiful colors, and even the strange ideas were new to us, and we loved them, and that was why we tried to buy a Dali. My father thought that we were going to go crazy and he'd have to end by supporting us if we kept on wasting our money this way when he saw the painting, because in that era this painting was very shocking.
What did he say when he saw it?
I don't think he said anything. He was speechless. It's obvious that that is a good idea, to use your leg as a table.
We should all use our legs as tables.
And one time we were over there trying to find the exact spots that Dali had used to do these marvelous paintings. And we found this place on the hill going up from Port Lagod and asked Dali, and he said, yes, this is where it was. And so then Dali posed for us.
Did you go to Cap Creus with Dali? Did he take you on a trip?
Yeah, we've been around with him.
In Gala's boat.
And it was very rough that day, as I remember, when we were coming around the point going into the bay. I didn't like it very much. And he loved to talk about esoteric things and try to make us look, stupid, that we didn't know things, and we didn't know many, many things. We spent years under Dali's tutelage, and gradually we learned a lot.
Did he tease you? I mean,
oh yes,
did he?
Yes.
How did he tease you?
He loved it when I made mistakes, and I said this is Portuguese, and he said that's not Portuguese. He said you're stupid.
Now, I feel very privileged to be looking at one of your diaries.
No, nothing.
I feel very privileged.
Well,
not many eyes have seen this document.
No, these were all things that Dali was talking about.
Sure.
I'd get the books he was reading. And
It's been a university for you, really, a sort of university course, being in such close contact to Dali.
Oh, God, yes.
Because he, as you say, he mentioned a book, you went away.
To my surprise, Morse opened his massive Dali diary for me.
Welcome to go through them, because there's no secret. This is my original.
A biographer's dream. It spans decades and is full of witty and incisive comments about Dali's day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Your trips, where you went.
Where we went, all that.
Do you
talk to him on the telephone, things like that.
Do you paste in correspondence, that sort of thing?
It's also terrific about all the people the Morses met during their trips to Cadaqués.
Captain Peter Moore, I presume?
Yes, yes, and Mr. Miro, Monsieur Marcel Duchamp, who enjoyed the trip, Monsieur Garcia Lorca.
I'm glad to see that Lorca's reading about himself in a good book. Captain Peter Moore began to work for Dali in the 1950s.
Hopla. Dali behind the wheel is something I've never seen, because he never was behind the wheel of anything. And Mrs. Dali, who is there, seems to be very worried. The head was made in Paris for a television commercial for Chocolat Lanvin.
Je suis fou du chocolat Lanvin.
This isn't really a sort of traditional museum, is it?
No, no. It's more a private collection which is on view to people who are interested. A museum would be pompous.
This joint creation of Moore and his wife is tangible evidence of the personal benefits that could accrue from being Dali's loyal servant.
You met Dali first in Rome, if I'm right.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell me about that meeting?
Well, I was living in Rome and working for a gentleman called Sir Alexander Corda.
That was in 1955. And Dali liked the idea of having an aide-de-camp. He liked the idea that you're a military man.
Military advisor was my title.
Military advisor?
No. We went to lunch at the United Nations, and I sat next to him, and somebody says, "Who is this one?" He said, "My military advisor."
He liked the fact that you'd been in intelligence.
No, I had not been in intelligence. I'd been in psychological warfare, which is not the same kettle of fish.
Sorry about that, got that one wrong. But he felt that having been in psychological warfare, you'd be in a strong position to protect him against his many potential enemies.
Not only that, but to amplify his talent.
The Dali circus hit the road with Moore as ringmaster. Watching it all in the 60s was Andy Warhol, who acknowledged Dali as the great pioneer of the happening and the cult of personality, and of the gains to be made from the blurring of the boundary between an artist and his work. Gala continued to control the paintings, but Moore looked after everything else, from graphics and advertising spreads to designs for jewelry.
Well, it was designed for me by Salvador Dali, and it's made of the green peridots and diamonds. And Dali says that they are, everything comes from the sky. The water comes from the sky.
And you yourself, you got a 10% on everything you set up, all the deals you set up.
10%, and I paid my own expenses. And I had no contract.
You made a few million.
I make 10% of 32 millions.
Pretty good. Moore confirmed Dali's instinct for the link between art and showbiz, and this commercial jamboree's still going on. You worked with Dali for 20 years. You got to know him tremendously well. What, in your opinion, drove the man?
Fame, not money.
And why did he need fame so desperately?
Because it opens every door, because once you've known fame, you become an addict.
What did he hate in people? Well, there must have been something that he hated. Arse lickers.
No, that he liked.
He liked arse lickers?
Yes, but let me see. Ugly people.
Ugly people?
Yeah. You see too many ugly people, you risk becoming ugly yourself by mimetism. He never thought he was good looking, he thought he was interesting looking, and he would put on wigs and make the moustaches a little longer by cutting a piece of his hair and putting a little pomade. But he looked good when he was dressed up, he looked good. He never thought he was a handsome man, but he thought he was an interesting looking man. That's his own opinion of himself.
The first question that I want to put you, it really ought to be about modern art, but I can't help it. There's some delicious frivolity in you which makes me ask it, is how did you manage to produce those marvelous moustaches? Have any trouble with it at night? I mean, do you have to peg it or anything like that, or does it stand up at night?
No, in the night, clean every night. If you come in soft, sleep.
So at night it droops down while you're sleeping,
completely.
And then in the morning up she goes again.
3 minutes. Only in 3 minutes fix my moustache.
And then you feel you can face the world with that wonderful moustache standing up.
Yes, because every day becoming much more practical for my inspiration.
But I'm fascinated to know that.
After the explosion of the first atom bomb in 1945, Dali's painting and self-promotion began to draw heavily and very idiosyncratically on first nuclear physics and soon after DNA and the origins of life.
Because myself believe, contrary, that the modern atomic age is very gay. No, nothing is more gay than the collision and explosion of intra-atomic conflicts of nuclear physics.
You feel that really livens things up enormously.
For me, is the more happy thing is look these terrific conflicts about electrons and pi mesons and atoms. Is everything jumping and romping in a completely extraordinary eurythmic feeling. one new kind of atomic and nuclear mysticism.
Well, thank you very much. That's a fascinating phrase, nuclear mysticism.
Eso seguro, pero como he dicho muchas veces, esos otros mundos están en el nuestro. Residen en la Tierra y precisamente en el centro de la cúpula del Museo Dalí, donde hay todo el nuevo mundo insospechado y alucinante del surrealismo.
In 1961, Dali decided that he wanted to project his ideas into an original three-dimensional space. In the shell of the Teatro Principal in his hometown of Figueras, where he had held his first exhibition as an adolescent, he decided to create his own extraordinary museum. It was to be a combination of theatre and art gallery, with the stress on surprise and entertainment. There wouldn't even be any explanatory labels. The project took 10 years to complete. Today, it's a major tourist attraction for visitors to the Costa Brava. At the museum, I talked to the second most important woman in Dali's life. Nanita Kalashnikov is not a Russian, but a Spaniard from Madrid.
The museum meant a lot for him. Every day he will call how many people have gone to the museum. Oh, 5,000 or 300 or whatever. Oh, look. He was very proud of the museum.
She met Dali in New York in the 1950s, and they became lifelong friends. Dali nicknamed her Louis XIV, Louis XIV, on account of her regal bearing. Did he arrive on time for appointments?
He never had a watch, never.
Never had a watch?
Never, but he was never 1 minute late. Never. I'm so sorry now that he had to wait for so long for me because I'm always late. But he didn't mind because he loved, he had so much to think about and he was taking, So he loved to wait for somebody.
You knew Dali intimately. After Dali, you're the woman that Dali most loved. Do you think you know what really drove him as a human being? What it was that really made him be Dali, to make him do the things he did, to paint the things he did?
Oh yes, because we spoke very much about it, very often. Tried to explain it to me, probably trying to explain it to himself, trying to discover, why he was like that. And telling me about his childhood and his youth, which made all that he was, like all of us. Because as I say, he was quite shy and he didn't want, to perform like that at all. And he knew I didn't like it at all, so he always said, I know you didn't like me this afternoon when I did that, but I have to, because if I was, the real little Dali, shy, I'd be nothing. It was his, curtain.
Your eccentricity that you are...
I keep it pardon. Everybody talk about eccentricity. It's a little true, but I'm total and absolutely paradoxical man. Yeah, it's true, I'm eccentric, but in the same time, I'm concentric.
Nanita often posed for Dali and appears, for example, in The Apotheosis of the Dollar. The huge painting was executed in Portligat with the aid of pulleys.
It was quite interesting because it has, it had a hole on the floor and the painting was going down. I don't know how he could do the whole thing. He never had the whole thing. He never saw the whole thing. It was just by parts.
It's lovely. But was it on a sort of pulley going up and down into?
Yes, going down, completely down on the, on the second floor. So he could never see. So it was quite a surprise when we saw it, you know, at the end, the whole thing.
Dali spent his summers in Portligat.
Should I show you the door to the to the library?
Unfortunately, the house was empty and closed when we were filming. Carlos Lozano, part of Dali's entourage in the 1970s, remembers it in its heyday.
Down this gate here is a little beach where Dali once kept swans. They were eaten by foxes. They didn't last very long, but they were very pretty to look at. This is where Dali held court. This would be the throne. There was a wooden sculpture here, and he would be sitting here in the middle.
Why don't you sit down? Let's have a look.
He would be
What
sitting,
did he look like, yeah?
sitting sort of like this, with his cane, looking out, you know, with his eyes glowing, and everybody would be sort of serving him or trying to find out what would please him the most. He was very imperial at one part of his life. He was just very demanding without asking.
So he was surrounded by the beautiful people?
Yes, preferably androgynous types he loved the most, where they were sort of angelic, where according to Dali they had no sex. The angel is sexless. Therefore, it was very attractive to him to be surrounded by a court of
sexless creatures.
Yes.
Well, I was very pleased when he asked me to pose for Angelic and the dragon, you know, because it was usually I pose for drawings and sketches, and they were, you know, small format, but that was a gigantic painting. He wanted me in the nude, you know, with my hand held up like this.
My research established that Amanda Lear originally performed under the stage name of Piki Doslo in Le Carrousel, a famous drag club in Paris. April Ashley, Britain's first self-declared transsexual and one of the club's stars, published this picture in her book.
Dali was fascinated by you, but he was also fascinated by the whole sex change aspect of your life. I mean, it's ridiculous to deny that because April Ashley's book is there.
Yes,
Do you object to my asking you about that?
Yes, I read her book, and I couldn't understand why she made up so many stories in her book. I mean, suddenly, people came up and say, you were a sex change. I said, it's a good story, let's keep it, you know. And in fact, Salvador Dali, who adored to scandaliser le bourgeois, he adored to shock people, jumped on it, said, great, yeah, let's, you know, he already was talking to Louis XIV in a masculine way. It was he, the Sun King, a nice lady with 3 daughters, you know. There was absolutely no hint of sex change in her. But again, he was referring to her as he. And all the girls, including Gala, were he, you know. So Amanda Lee was also he for Dali. And people would say, that's because she's a sex change, you know, and he called her he. I said, no, nothing to do with that. It's just that Dali called everybody he.
He loved the body of a man. He was always surrounded by beautiful boys and beautiful bodies, but he didn't like. I mean, he didn't like men.
There's no doubt in your minds that.
I know, no doubt at all.
That he was not homosexual.
No, not at all. No. He would have been with Garcia Lorca if he would have been homosexual, because Garcia Lorca adored him and he loved Garcia Lorca.
Do you think he was basically gay?
I think he was basically, yes, intellectually. Absolutely, intellectually. He preferred the male body to the female body. Mm-hmm. That's a fact. He loved the little, you know, the little, we call them telephones around women's breasts, you know, those little sort of bumps. Mm-hmm. And, and he would say, can I see your telephone? Or can I dial, you know, when the girls came into the room, and he'd have them take off their tops, and there would be this light that would go around, so the light would actually clothe, you know, it was like a beautiful light, but you would see the bare breast, and then he would see the breast in that way. He loved to watch and not be seen. That was part of it.
His best painting probably is the great masturbator, and that's what he really was.
Yes.
And what he enjoyed, and what he knew about very much.
Yeah. Nobody disturbed him.
Nobody disturbed him, the great master.
Yes.
But certainly, one reads about his happenings and his boys and his girls and his orgies and these things. I mean, did Gala ever get involved in any of that?
No, orgies.
No, because the happenings were very, very, sort of very innocent. And I think she was less innocent than that. I mean, her happenings were real happenings.
Yeah.
And our happenings were completely crazy, mental, nothing.
You disappoint me. I thought they were better than that.
No. They were quite good.
The preparation was
You're two very liberated people, so maybe what you think is good.
No, but the preparation was much more important than the thing. So.
And to talk about it the day after, very much more.
And then when the thing had to happen, it was so late that everybody was tired. No, Gala
was much
not
more
tired.
to the
Gala was
to the
more
point,
serious, yes.
I think.
When Gala wanted somebody, she really went for him.
She did.
Gala needed privacy for a constant succession of young lovers. So Dali decided to restore for her a broken-down mansion in the village of Pubol, about 50 miles inland from Portligat. Here for several summers, Gala ruled supreme. The story is that Dali was only allowed to visit her if he had her written permission.
Only with written invitation.
From your wife?
And Dali is every day more masochist and loved tremendously this condition.
He was telling me that the only woman he ever actually did it with was Gala, his wife.
Yeah.
And I said, well, then you know how it is. He said, no, and it's not even how you think. It's completely different. I said, why? Oh, what's so special? He said, no, you don't realize. With Gala, it's something else. She's the one and only woman that I ever had sex with. Proper sex.
Had? I mean, in the past tense?
Yeah, and that's it, and nobody else. He was not a very well-balanced man. Also, he kept saying, I have a thermostat that makes me always in a good mood, you know, like a thermostat. But I've seen him also in very bad mood and with fear and anxieties and ups and downs. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been a creative painter. All the things he was doing were to exercise madness. He was acting mad in order to exercise madness.
And gaze upon its ample cloth, creased 2,000 years.
Avec Chris, no more Chris. Allons.
The court, of course, is an imaginary court, which he has invented for his own enjoyment. Every now and then we make new appointments.
When Peter Moore, the chief courtier, left, his place was taken by Enrique Sabater, a highly ambitious young Catalan photographer, footballer, journalist, pilot, businessman, and general factotum, who'd begun to take pictures of Dali in the 1960s. I eventually managed to track him down at one of his luxurious villas. Sabater is one of the most controversial figures in the story of Dali's last years.
You know much more things than myself, you know, about me.
I'm only interested in the truth, you know.
Yes, but biographers, you are dangerous.
Are you frightened?
No, I am not. I am not.
But I might blacken your name. Some people think you're a monster, Senor Sabater. Some people think you're a sort of monster, and that basically you didn't really like Dali.
Oh, it's funny. This is the first time. It's funny what you say. I think I always have proof to have much more respect to Mr. Dali than many other people.
Such as? Which people? Any names?
Well, many. There are so many names that this interview will finish never.
I thought you were going to say it's over now. But your successor was, according to Gala, better looking than you, Enrique Sabater.
No, she said he was more intelligent, younger, and better looking.
In that order?
In that order. So I said, listen, as I have to leave you anyway because I had to have an operation, so I said, you're bienvenue, bienvenue.
He also took a smaller percentage.
But yes, he did a half price. But he did it half price, but it cost him 10 times more, so I don't know how that worked out.
Peter Moore's story is that he got a 10% commission, and you said you do the same job for 5%.
Who said that?
Peter Moore.
He doesn't know nothing about me.
You've said frequently to interviewers that when you left Dali, he had $32 million
in the bank.
And that when he died, he had nothing.
When he died, he owed money. So he was taken to the cleaners by somebody.
As a biographer, I found myself listening to endless accusations and counter-accusations, in my view, largely stemming from Dali and Galler's indifference to ethical considerations. And did you make a lot of money very quickly for Dali and for yourself?
Of course, of course. For that reason, some people think I am a monster.
So you got at least 10% commission?
More than that, because Mr. Moore was doing only the contests for etchings, graphic works, and contests for TV show or something like that, but never in the oil paintings and everything.
I can only make a statement that when I left him, he was rich, and when they buried him, he was poor. That I can make a statement.
So I'll have to do some research there. To continue that research, I went to the suburbs of New York.
Good morning.
Mr. Field.
Yes.
How are you? I'm Ian Gibson.
Right, come in.
It's great to meet you.
Please do. The Dali world is up here.
For the first time, I was meeting Albert Field, who had become the self-appointed archivist of Dali's work back in the 1940s. My God, I've just seen something fantastic.
That's a painting he made when he was 10 years old. And he told me so himself. And by that time he was already an artist. You can see it's well balanced. There's even a little bird up in the corner. This is the Dali room in here.
Ah, the Holy of Holies.
Yes.
Yeah, let's see this. All the additions, as I've looked for and couldn't find, it's all in here, in the suburbs of New York. It's unbelievable.
Well,
for 40 years, Field has been collecting and compiling a catalogue of Dali's graphic work, a daunting, lifelong task pursued with fanatical energy.
You can see the carpet.
What's this? This is your index.
This is the index of the prints in my catalog.
Yeah.
All of that.
My God.
3 columns wide. And this is the Bible. 5 volumes in that size with 104 illustrations by Dali. Painting was, and drawing, creation was his whole life. That's what he wanted to do all the time. And he wasn't greedy for money, as people said. Gala was. He was just delighted that people would pay him for what he wanted to do anyway, and which he would have done.
Did you communicate in English, basically?
At the beginning, it was mostly in French, because his English was much worse at that time. And as a matter of fact, he always got worse in the presence of reporters.
What does it say here? À mon plus fidèle et persévérant collaborateur de Dalinisme.
Yes, exactly.
Albert Field. Ah, he's still spelling your name rather oddly.
He never did get completely straight that my name was Field. And when he did finally discover there was a D on the end, he spelled it F-I-L-D, which is perfectly logical. That's the fake, and that's the real one.
How did Dali feel about the fakes that he knew were circulating? Did he talk to you about?
We're talking about fakes of prints mostly.
Yeah.
Yes, he thought it was a joke. He said at one point that it showed that he was famous when they were making fakes of his work. But he wasn't serious about it, he was just joking. He was actually very annoyed at the faking of prints and made 2 public statements, notarized and the like, about the fact that you have to look very carefully at prints to find out if they're good or bad. And that, of course, is the thing that I do better than anybody else. And I know more about Dali's prints and their trickery than anybody else does, because I'm a suspicious character. I don't believe what I'm told.
In some ways, Dali was his own worst enemy. He signed thousands of blank lithographic sheets, and in doing so, grabbing the money up front, encouraged the many kinds of fakes that now began to flood the market.
Only idiotic people tell the truth.
Only what people?
Idiotic.
Idiotic people? Only stupid people tell the truth.
Because myself, I'm very intelligent, never tell the truth.
Never tell the truth? Is it true that you would sort of consider that in many respects a lie is closer to the truth than truth?
I am the disciple of Sant Ignacio de Loyola, as one saint in Spain, as the patron of Jesuits.
I haven't the vaguest idea what you've said. After 10 minutes, Dali left. Salvador Dali, a great artist, and for years we've all been trying to figure out, is he a great put-on artist? David Klein, New York.
While I'm playing the role of the valet, can you?
Exactly, everybody's my slave.
Yes, no, everybody's not.
Everyone.
No.
Out! The people don't like it becoming my slave, no more.
Can't I have another role besides?
All right, I'll finish.
I wasn't very interested in Salvador Dali because he was known among my friends in the visual arts as this sort of sellout, this commercial former genius who basically was involved only in his own exploitation of his abilities to market himself, whatever. Didn't interest me. I went to the cocktail reception. He was very taken by meeting me physically, sort of his eyes kind of popped out of his head as they frequently did. I had learned later from Gala, later that week I think, that he was fascinated because I looked, at the age of 32, very much like his father.
The real reason why they needed Michael Stout was that the US tax authorities were onto them. The Dalis had to find someone competent and sympathetic, and Stout was also an expert on copyright law.
In the early part of 1976, they received a notice from the Internal Revenue Service that a criminal investigation was commencing into their tax situation, and that was very serious.
Salvador Dali, myself, is very rich, and Dali loved tremendously money and gold.
Money was simply the oil that greased the wheel of their life. It wasn't about saving or accumulating or using money for power. They weren't interested in intelligent investment advice.
I was just going to ask you, they didn't invest, did they?
I mean, basically, Gala was the type that wanted the money under the mattress or in the safe deposit box or in the bank or something. The Dalis were people who believed that a $5,000 check should be deposited in person in the bank, even if it meant spending $6,000 on the air ticket to the depository.
Politically, Dali offended many people by his public support for General Franco.
But what do you think about Franco, for example?
Franco, I believe, is perhaps the only intelligent man today in politics.
But he hasn't solved the acute problem of poverty in Spain, for example.
But myself like it poverty.
You like poverty?
Yes, because like the Inquisition and poverty is necessary for only the people is happy and is completely compressed by Inquisition.
But soon his support for Franco turned sour. In 1975, the aging general executed 5 alleged terrorists, 3 of them Basques. Dali thought that the general had done a good thing. Maybe he should have executed just a few more. The papers picked this up, and suddenly Dali was terrified. Then some death threats arrived. People hurled stones through his windows, and Dali simply decided there was only one thing to do, and that one thing was to flee. And for the first time in his life, he boarded an aeroplane.
We flew to Geneva, and there in the street, he tripped and he fell. And that was very symptomatic, because Dali never fell. That's why I saw him on the floor, picking himself up, and suddenly he looked so pathetic, you know, and gauche and old. And I said, no, there is something changing. I could see there was something changing there. And that was really the beginning of the end, you know, after that Sabatier, the problems, the taxes, the wheeling and dealing. I don't know what they did, you know. But it wasn't the same Dali from now on.
Suddenly Sabatier carried a gun. I mean, the Dalis never had someone walking around them with a gun. And there was a climate of fear.
They scared him. Dali was not, he was quite insecure. And it was very easy. He was very vulnerable. And it was very easy to,
And they took advantage of his illness.
Yeah,
They took
everything,
advantage of
everything.
The gun was not my idea. The gun, it was direct from the government. More than that, it was asking by Mr. Dali himself.
So, you know, suddenly in his head, he started thinking that he was such a great, important man that, you know, the whole world was after him. A bit of paranoia came there. And unfortunately, Sabatier was there to encourage him, you know, to say, don't worry, I got the gun, you know, I'll protect you.
But nothing could protect Dali from his greatest fear, old age. His health was declining, and in January 1980, Gala and Dali returned to Spain from the USA, seriously ill. I was in the Theatre Museum the afternoon in October 1980 when Dali staged a pathetic comeback. I asked him about his relationship with Lorca, and he muttered a conventional reply, the old fire gone. It was clear to me and everyone there that neither had long to live.
We didn't know what to do. We knew that he was something was wrong, and Gala she was at a loss to know what to do. We were sitting in the doctor's office, and I don't know how to say it, but we both cried.
You cried?
I put my arm around her, and there was Dali sick in bed. We finally got him there from Catechist, got him to the hospital, and he was very sick, and we both cried.
You really got to love him then? I mean, you really got that close that you love the man?
You know, it was Gala and I that were just sitting there crying, and Dali we got him in bed, and it was a terrible experience.
And she was, Ren was hugging her and she was crying, and, you know, it was all very sad. And I believe that he was really religious. Towards the end of his life, you know, he was very worried, and he wanted to have faith, and he just, he couldn't seem to get the faith that he wanted to have.
My own feeling is that Dali's kitsch religiosity had more to do with his need to ingratiate himself with Franco's Catholic Spain.
Pero entonces usted cree en Dios?
Creo en Dios, pero no tengo la fe.
Ah.
Por las matemáticas y por las ciencias particulares, sé que es indiscutible que Dios tiene que existir, pero no me lo creo. Y eso es terrible. Cada vez me acerco más, pero no me lo creo.
¿Le gustaría creérselo?
Pues, entonces todo estaría resuelto, sobre todo el problema de la muerte, porque yo tiemblo de pensar en la muerte.
When Gala died in 1982, Dali was like an abandoned child. While driving to Pubol, I can't but think of the last journey of Gala, when she died in Portligat and was taken illegally from Portligat to Pubol, because she'd said that she not only wanted to die in Pubol, but she wanted to be buried there. And so when she died in 1982, they wrapped her in a blanket, popped her in the back of the Cadillac, and Arturo Caminada, Dali's faithful servant, drove her the 80 kilometers to this village of Pubol. And it's the first time she ever traveled in the back of the car. Wrapped in a blanket, dead. And it was illegal, they shouldn't have done it. And I can just imagine the Cadillac gliding onto this archway with Gala wrapped in a blanket on the back seat. Really eerie. After Gala's death, Dali stayed on in her castle, refusing to leave. 2 years later, he had to, after being badly burned when his bed caught fire.
After Dali was suddenly left all alone, you know, in Pubol, something very strange happened. It's been going on already quite a few months before even Gala died. He hated himself. Dali, I never could imagine that Dali would end up like this. He was saying to people, give me a gun, I want to shoot myself, I'm going to shave my mustache, I don't want to be Dali anymore, I don't want to paint anymore. It's like everything that he had built, he was rejecting. He wanted to be left alone. Suddenly all the friends, you know, Kalashnikov, all the friends have called and said, Dali, do you need us? We know you are now in a moment of need, you know, you need your friends. no, leave me alone, leave me alone. He wouldn't take anybody on the phone, and that was it. And most of his friends got very hurt from this. You know, they say, come on, I mean, we are your friend, we are here for you. Now you need us. You've been so generous to us, you've been so good. No, no, no. And so his entourage started building a wall around Dali.
After his operation for burns, Dali was installed in a tower of his museum in Figueras. He never returned to Portligat, and arguments still rage about what happened to some of the contents of the house.
A ver, cuando muere Gala,
sí,
a partir de aquel momento no vuelve nunca,
nunca más.
Ni una sola vez.
Ni una sola vez.
¿Y qué pasó con todos los papeles y los libros y todo?
Pues no lo sabemos.
No lo sabemos, pero han desaparecido.
Sí.
No se sabe dónde están.
Ahí se estuvo su secretario de entonces, el señor de Charnes, se estuvo ese verano con sus hijos viviendo aquí, utilizando toda esta casa.
Es decir, que no
y él venía y a mí, una de estas personas de este hotel de aquí, me ha dicho que le veía pasar cada semana que llevaba una maleta. Y entonces le preguntó una vez, le digo, ¿y cómo? ¿Y qué hace usted que se lleva esta maleta? Y dice, no, ce que je m'emporte ça, a París por la fotografía, ça a été M. Dali quemado en la permisión. Yo le digo, pero ¿cómo no le decía a usted que aquí hay mejor luz que en París para fotografiarlos?
Robert Deschamps, a French photographer and long-standing friend of the Dalis, became their last secretary. Very controversial figure in Spain, he's the author of several books on Dali, lavishly illustrated. He has refused to help with this biography, and he's refused to collaborate in any way on this film.
Con el paso de los años, los temblores se agravaron hasta tal punto que en 1986 la firma de Dalí aparece con este trazo debajo de un importante contrato de cesión de derechos de autor a su colaborador Robert Deschamps.
The Spanish government of the day ratified the contract, giving Desmartes, the foreign company set up by Deschamps, control of Dali's copyright for almost 20 years. Many of Dali's associates are still unhappy about this situation.
The signature, I think, is real because it's shaky, and people don't normally forge shaky signatures. But whether Dali knew exactly what he was signing, since Deschamps was so helpful to him at times when he was living in very poor health or getting worse, he would have signed practically anything that he was asked to. So whether Dali knew it, I don't know. And there's no way to tell now.
I'm not going to tell you nothing.
There was also controversy about Dali's last will.
Will you talk about? But I will tell you.
Enrique Sabater had helped to prepare an earlier one.
Mr. and Mrs. Dali, they spent 7 months every day taking myself the notes for 7 in order to make the last and definitely will themselves.
And what was in the wills that they drew up at that time?
The one of the 7 month aside.
Yeah.
That everything will belong to Spain through the Teatro Museo in Figueras.
Todo lo que yo poseo y que puedo poseer, lo voy a dar al Estado español.
Dali's declarations never contained the whole truth. In fact, an earlier will had divided the legacy equally between his native Catalonia and the rest of Spain. Dali died in 1989. Dali had asked for his face to be covered when he died, but that request was not respected. At the very last moment, before the coffin lid was to be screwed down, his most faithful retainer, Artur Caminana, did cover his face, weeping, with a cloth. The awful thing is Artur Caminada didn't receive a single peseta in Dali's will, and he was heartbroken. And one wonders, as a biographer, when one reflects over a man's life, what value Dali actually gave to feelings of loyalty, of love, of tenderness.
Y allí se hizo, y además se hizo 2 tumbas. una para Gala y otro para Dalí.
There was even controversy about where he was to be buried.
Y Dalí quiso que se dejaran una ventana mirando al norte, a la mano derecha de Gala, para que cuando Dalí se muriera, pues se pudieran dar las manos.
¿Usted tiene la convicción total de que Dalí quería estar aquí enterrado al lado de
Sí,
Gala?
sí, sí. Dalí me firmó, porque yo lo necesitaba, un papel de que o pedían la autorización para hacer la tumba de Gala y Dalí para estar juntos el resto de la eternidad.
But a few hours before Dali died, the mayor of Figueres made a surprise announcement. He alleged that Dali had told him a month earlier that he now wanted to be buried in his museum.
Of course, he'd be sorry not to be with Gala, but I'm sure that he wanted to be in the museum. It's amazing for a painter like that to die, you know, in the museum and to live there in a room, you know, like that. He could see all the people coming and going. So I'm sure that that's a place where he wanted to be.
What an irony, after all the controversy surrounding Dali's burial in this theatre. They don't even realize he's there under that slab, standing there looking around. Nobody realizes that Dali is under that slab. And to see his tomb, you've got to go down this way. Come out of the loos and into this little sort of crypt, surrounded by tawdry things, late Dali works. And there is the slab covering the tomb of the great man. Hardly anybody seems to notice it, any more than they notice the slab upstairs. And here lies the man who was terrified of death all his life. His title, of course, was given to him by the King of Spain, by Juan Carlos.
Una part del progrés de la humanitat. Viva el rei! Viva Espanya! Viva Catalunya!
¿Queréis luz o no? Sí.
Els flaix dels fotògrafs s'han disparat davant de la cara de Salvador Dali.
Or you haven't done enough separate